In this video, I want to talk a little bit about pivot tables and in particular show you how to implement a custom formula. So a pivot table, essentially it's a way in Excel to summarize data quickly in an interactive fashion, so we can actually control the way our table looks by simply dragging fields to in and out of a template. So we can quickly add subtotals and do some reporting features like sorting and filtering and use some built-in features like counts, sums, and averages. But what I want to focus on is just to simply show you how to derive a custom formula in a pivot table. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the task. We do have some application information from various colleges in Canada. We're to build a pivot table to summarize this data that we can understand it a little bit more easily. The main part of this video is that we'd like to explore that custom calculation field, and we'd like to calculate the admit rate, which is the number of admitted students divided by the number of total applicants, and yield rate, which is the number of registered students divided by the number of admitted students. So let's go ahead and open up the starting file to start this learning activity. Okay, when we open up the file, what we see is a list of the number of applicants received by these various colleges during a specific year, and broken down by various categories. For example, prior education, post-secondary, high school, unknown high school, etc. in this column G, followed by which program of study is actually being applied to here, and some other information here. So what we'd actually like to do is to create a pivot table, and I'm simply going to go to the Insert field here and click on the Pivot Table. I'm going to create a new worksheet. The range is OK. Let's hit OK. I'm going to rename this Application Pivot. Of course, you could name it whatever you like, whatever makes the most sense. Once we click on the template here, this is the work area, if you will, we'll see the field list display on the right. You'll also see the table options here, the pivot table options, so we can control things like changing or updating the source information, various design features, perhaps different colors and strategies. We could use, I'm going to select this gray and black one. Can control the look and feel of it and control grand totals and subtotals and things like that. So in any pivot table, it's a great idea to start exploring with your field list, because sometimes it may not be intuitive how you actually want to summarize your data. So in this particular case, I think it makes sense to separate the rows by the institution name. So we do have our 5 institutions there. What we also might want to do is categorize this along the columns by year, and then start to think of what is needed to filter and what is needed to actually calculate values. I think it makes sense to sum all of the first 3 attributes, so application, admitted students, and registered students. Okay, so we have by default all of the sums of the applicants, admitted students, and registered students by college in each given year. Me in particular, I don't necessarily like how this is summarizing the data. What I expected is actually to have column labels 2005 and 6, the next column 2006 and 7, the next column after that 2007, 8, and so forth. What we can actually do is you'll see that we have the value automatically generated here for us. I want to just change the location of where these values are being displayed. And what we can do is just simply drag this to the row. And what that's going to do for us is actually put all of those calculated fields here, the values, and treat it as if it was a field itself. So rather than showing those values calculated in a column breakdown, we're actually telling it to break it down by row, so we see the years just like I really wanted to see here. And we do have the sum of the applicants, admitted students, registered students. We could at any point change the names, maybe rather than just sum, we want to change the field value setting. And first off, maybe we don't want the sum of being there at all. Maybe we just want simply applicants. So we could just remove that. We might also want to show values as, not that part, but the number format as a number without decimals and a comma separator. So we can hit OK and OK. It does not necessarily like the name of just applicants because it's actually the same thing as the source, so maybe pound applicants will work. So that shortens up that a little bit. Let's do the same thing for the next fields. Rather than sum of, just hit pound, OK. Arrow down here, field values, pound, OK. And then I forgot to change the comma style, so I want to be consistent. And I'm going to change that for the remaining two. So number, decimal places 0, comma, OK, OK, and then do that finally for the registered number. Field value, number format, number shows 0 and a comma. Okay, so we have all those totals. We do see our grand total here. I would like to get rid of that so we can go to the design grand totals off, so we no longer see that in our table. Now that we actually have some data here, let's explore the different design options for us, and you can kind of get a sneak peek behind here of what your table would look like with these various formatting strategies. So I tend to like the banded row, and I think this one looks pretty good with the banded row labels here. Okay, so what else can we do? Well, I think everything in the pivot table is fine as far as the information goes. We could add a report filter, perhaps subject area, so we can control which subject we're actually looking for. So if I wanted to say, let's say engineering only, I could click select multiple items and just say, well, just show the engineering students. Okay, or healthcare, preclinical and health, or any of the ones you want. Okay, so now we have that breakdown. So now comes the fact that we would like to calculate that admit rate and yield rate. Okay, so when we need to calculate a field, a custom field, we need to go to the options, and then under here you'll see fields, items, and sets. We can add a field. Okay, so let's add a calculated field. I'm going to call this, let's just call it admit rate. And the formula is right now simply just 0. Well, let's get rid of that. I'm going to hit equals. And if we remember, the admit rate formula is just the number of admitted students. So the admitted students, we could insert that field and then do our mathematics, if you will, divide by number of applicants. So we can go to the number of applicants here, insert field, and hit OK. Now we are seeing a divide by 0 error, and it's only because we don't have information from most of the colleges. The only one we do have from 2005 and 6 is looks like the University of Northern British Columbia. We don't actually have the other ones. So I mean, we can leave that as is, or maybe we're just doing the analysis for the last 3 years. Let's just filter, if you will, and only display 2009 through 2011 by selecting this arrow down, select all, and then just select the last 3 years. Whoops, not 4. Okay, so let's hit OK. So we do have that What it's saying is actually the sum, which is just by default the calculation field. We'd want the average, and I'm not going to put the average here. I'm just going to put even a percentage would work for us. We need to change the number style. Of course, it's showing 1. So if we go to, let's just say percentage, to we don't necessarily need to see decimal places. Maybe 1 would be sufficient. Hit OK. We can see that our emit rate is actually calculated in each one of these categories. So that's nice. Let's add the second one, field items sets calculated field. And rather than calling this field 1, I'm going to call it yield rate. Okay, the formula will be then equal to the number of registered students, insert field, divided by the number of admitted students, insert field. And then simply when you have this, whatever formula you want to add there, you can hit OK. We're actually going to have to do the same type of thing. And in this case, we want to show at least this as a percentage with 1. Whoops, I'm actually clicked on the wrong one. Let's see. I wanted to modify yield rate. So yield rate, field values. Rather than calling it sum, I'm going to call it percent yield rate. And show values, well, actually a number format, I apologize. A percentage with 1 decimal place. Hit OK, hit OK here. And before I changed it from a sum to an average, it doesn't technically matter. Just the way the table's built, we can verify that by these values here. Let's say 64.9 to see if it changes if I were to change it to an average, and it doesn't change at all. I'm going to undo my steps so everything is back to a percent yield rate. So again, we have the option to add custom formulas and things like that. Another part, again, is that you may want this table summarized a little bit differently, which is of course fine, but just be aware that we can actually change where those calculated values actually are with this value field here. To me, I think this makes a lot more sense, and it's easier to understand than the other way. So, but again, it's personal preference. So as we're wrapping up this learning activity, I am reminded that we could do one more thing, and I should show you this option since we're talking about custom formulas. Remember when we had the problem of displaying NAs? So I'm going to basically unfilter all of these years by showing them all again, and we have these divide by 0 errors. There is one thing we can actually do with that, which allows me to explain some extra functionality here of our formulas and whatnot. We can go to options, back into field items and sets, calculated fields, and this window actually gives us the option to see existing field calculations. We're not necessarily limited to simple calculations with times and plus and standard mathematical operations. We can actually utilize embedded formulas from Excel. So for example, we do have that divide by 0 error. Maybe we can utilize an Excel formula called if error, which simply takes 2 parameters. If there is no error, any error as a divide by 0 or an NA, the first parameter of the formula is that it'll display this as long as it doesn't show an error, comma, and then you get the opportunity to actually control what you want to display if in fact this formula generates an error. And for this particular example, since we're using a pivot table, you actually can't display text like a two double quotes. This is normally what I would do inside of a worksheet. What we actually could do is simply show a 0 which would work just fine. So if error, and then the field that you want to calculate, and again, you can actually utilize many different formulas. I'm just showing you the if error, but you can utilize any formula that you want that is available in Excel. And I'm going to put comma 0, which is going to display 0 if there's an error. So let's hit OK. We do see in this case all of the divided by zeros turning into zeros, which is about the best we can do. We can do the same thing with the other field, calculated field. Let's now adjust the yield rate and enter that formula if error, comma 0 parenthesis, and hit OK. So we are showing all years. At least now we don't have those hideous divide by error messages, which I think is a good thing. The final thing we can do, if you do start to get serious into implementing formulas, it might be a good idea to display your calculations, because you can essentially see this anywhere what the formulas are in an easy way. What we could actually do is go to field and say list formulas, and what that is going to do is going to give us a summary of all the fields that we have created and the exact formula that we typed. So it's a good idea if you're trying to prove or you're trying to give this sheet to somebody else and you want some documentation on the custom formulas that you develop.